as FaZe run out of time. Rops' late rotation leaves them high and dry. And despite that missed AWP shot and Twist's banging headshot, it's still going to come through for IHC. Karrigan did all he could, man. Through the smoke with a double kill on that spray. But it's the objective that comes up for IHC.
Yeah, just playing a time game around the bomb. Keeping this competitive, right? I think it would have been a worrying sign with FaZe having strung 5 rounds together in a row, winning everything since the pistol and the conversions. It felt like a big drought of rounds was coming for IHC. They've at least found one, but at quite the cost. You can see that despite winning that last round, they are lacking the resources here. Karrigan getting involved early. Another multi-kill from the man at the helm of FaZe. He does not want foul memories of his time in Katowice, not after the highs of 2022. A 5v3 of Brokey out with that swing. That is a clean flick. We'll have more work to do. His teammate in the site falls. Chance to move in and try play around this bomb for IHC. They've even got a smoke available for the coffin, so they can lock the AWP out of this one.
CT smoke will fade soon though, and the bomb hasn't made it across yet. Gotta go quick. Spam is very close for Karrigan. Blitz will get that stick off. No denying it yet. It's about moving off of the plant. Karrigan has him trapped in at oranges. Blitz takes a swing. It's Twist from afar. An annihilation. We call him the clutch king. He's still got a 1v4 to do though. Missed AWP from Brokey. Annihilation needs to force a fight, and they won't give him a chance. Nice trading for FaZe, who keep the spacing tight and won't let the time let them down this round. 6-4. And yeah, they break the streak, IHC, but they don't sit on it for long. FaZe come back in with a nice retake. And all, again, like previous round, set up from Karrigan. Double kill immediately. Peeks through that furious smoke at top car, and then re-pushes back through with a flash. He is keen in these rounds, and it's good to see. I actually haven't met this kind of suppression.
I think it's even more important because it's Karrigan the one to do it, right? Like, he's going to be looking down the line, getting you fired up, you know, and you see this guy running through banana smokes, multi-killing, finding a lot of success. It's going to...
Bro, Robert looks like he's 50 years old, bro. What's the highest sense I ever played before? I played the highest DPI. I don't know, what is it, like 2.2k or 2.4k, the highest DPI, and 1.3 cents. I don't know how much that was back then. Bro, Duncan, thank you so much for the 8 months tier 1. Welcome to joining the Your Mama gang. Thank you so much. 10 centimeter gang. I'm sorry I'm eating. Your Mama gang in the house. Am I on steroids? Not yet, but I will be one day. You will know when I take steroids. You will see. You will notice. At the moment, I'm still just eating a lot, like 5 to 6 meals a day, and training a lot. What am I eating? Chicken, broccoli, potatoes and cheese and water. This is the second meal of this today. And I have 7 eggs later, and I have yogurt later, and already had 2 meals before.
There's a bit of a gap here, right? The only vulnerability is the apartments. Brokey shot in the back as Rops trades places, but Techno 4K opens up with a double. They're even ready for Rops, and that is a shutdown. That is a lockout. The A site is off limits. IHC own it. And FaZe are left saving. This round is over quick as it began.
So cheeky as well. It's just the perfect remedy to FaZe's setup with 3 in middle. It looked like Blitz was in mid to throw that high flash over pit and set them out of apartments. But as soon as Brokey takes that shot, I should go screw it. We know the AWP is down for a millisecond. Let's take it. They hop out of apartments. No one was even watching it. And they shoot him in the back of the head. Even Twist didn't turn. Maybe the molly put him off. And he thought he was covered on short, but...
Ooh, Rain.
He's crispy right now. Deep fried.
Bro, I saw yesterday people talking shit. Yesterday people were talking shit about Rain and Karrigan. I look today. Today Rain and Karrigan carrying the kids, bro.
HC were wanting to take phases away. They throw 2 players at it, but Rain and Karrigan both get out alive. And I almost wonder if we're going to see IHC try to follow up with more of these A plays, right? Because the B sides felt a little tricky to get into. Carrigan's been a real nuisance there.
Yeah, I mean, that's you're not going to get that every time, right? It's just because it's so early in the round, and Rops is in Boiler, he's seen, he's heard nothing. They don't realize that there are 4 players already deep in apartments. IHC get there way ahead of the timing in FaZe's head. You've got to show some presence of Banana, though, or you will be flanked. So that Molly will keep Rain and Carrigan back for now. These two has been the stars of the show, no doubt about it. Blinded, doesn't matter. Rain, again, finds that opener at top B. Score, low health. Annihilation's actually picked Rops in middle, though. Still back around. Nice grenade for IHC. Keeps FaZe honest on this B site, but the AWP for the CT side will fire back. Bartak doesn't last long. 3 on 4. IHC have brackets. It's just Brokey here.
Yeah, the triple B push means that FaZe are going to be hot on their heels, but so much is weighted on Brokey's solo A hold with the AWP. Going to look to make a move now. If he goes too early, he could give this one away. Annihilation gets it. The backstab is in. He goes back with the bomb. Oh no! That is a bit of a misstep from Annihilation. Tries to get rid of them. And only now the penny drops that this A side of the map is clear. The flank is in. Blitz with the first. But he's still got so much more to do in this round. Can't make it past.
Oh, what an error. I don't think they realized there was a triple flank there. Like, it's the sheer numbers of FaZe. Right, Brokey solo A. He even peeks ahead of when he should with his flank coming in, but he's trying to assist them, and that just gives the pick over. It gives the pathway into A for IHC. But Annihilation with the bomb of all things. An irredeemable mistake.
Talk, boys. Bro, yeah, it's a throw by Annihilation, what's his name? But the thing is, he doesn't know at that point that it's 3 flanks. He just wants to get a frag back, so it's 2 on 2 after his teammate dies. So it's not really a throw when he doesn't have the info we have, you know?
Doesn't know for sure, but he's in the right spot, in the right angle, and gets the right kill. Blitz out.
I mean, these guys have 5 rounds. They're doing good, man.
And again, FaZe continue to be very active. Double apps, back out. Put the AWP on long after they flash it. They still have full info on Banana. I say full info, scores a little further. But FaZe are ready for this. I like this 1-2 punch. And again, if IHC don't show anything at B, FaZe will flank them in this round.
Perhaps even getting flashed in for mid-fights.
What the fuck?
Ooh, hello. Techno gets that trade. And now Brokey waits over in mid, having to go back, because once again, no one's got their eye on the apartments. IHC, that could be their way in here.
Yo, is Robs cheating?
Down into the pit now, exerting a good bit of control, but dealt with by Brokey's AWP, and no one else going to make it through the apartments. Scope weapons.
Yo, what was that, guys? What was that?
You amassing these rounds for the FaZe CT side.
There's been a couple of shaky moments, a couple of rounds that slipped through, but ultimately, as
that was
had guns,
that was
just
sus.
Been
That was sus.
game.
That's all I'm gonna say.
The 8-5 looks close.
Robs sus.
Off the pistol and conversions.
Ooh.
Some really sharp
Brokishka.
shooting
Ooh,
for FaZe. That's
Brokishka.
beautiful for Brokey. Headshot over that box. And now I actually have to eat the last. Another headshot from this big green.
Brokey is feeling it.
Lean, mean, killing machine. They're going to pop their heads out from under, though. Rob's trying to keep them trapped in their little hidey hole. And everyone fighting here for FaZe.
And Brokey dies. Out of all people, Brokey dies.
With headshots.
Oh.
It's 9-5. One more round left in the half. I actually can be happy, but not satisfied. Not yet.
Yeah, no, not with the fact that, you know, the bulk of these rounds right now have come off the back of the pistol and sticking the landing on those conversions, right? And sure, they've had close moments. They've had a couple of, you know, nice tries in there, but they're the ones that
are they starting for no 3B?
If FaZe end up running away with this, smoke down in top mid, and I feel like there's some treachery in play here.
As well.
Crossing all the way through with this AWP. He's Broky's now posted in a very strong position with it. That's a meaty nade onto Broky. The molly separates him from his teammate. Rops wins a fight over in the apartments, but Rain ain't so lucky. Dealt with over at the top of Banana, and now they're feeling the pressure to rotate players over towards B because Broky's tagged up.
A lot of wounded players in this round, right? Especially on IHC. Annihilation needs this pick. He's got it. Second door gone. Annihilation bangs out two at top mid, and they can't
these
go back
guys
to phases.
beasting
Banana
with
this
an
time.
off.
It's already locked out
What
by
the
Techno.
fuck, you read
FaZe
both of
wants
them?
to rotate safe, and Techno hears that as well. I actually have this plant open, in fact, and Techno needs to make up his mind. Flank or go back to middle, because he's still left out of the picture for now, as is Score, also on 4.
2v4 retake attempt. Carrigan already dead, trying to cross middle. Middle is off limits, and with Broky so tagged up, 25 points of health from the nades earlier at Banana.
Who left the game,
like
Rob?
IHC have held on.
Bro, Rob left the game so he can fix his fucking aimbot. Yo, Radical. Hello, bro. It's right for Turkey. Do I lost a friend? 2K people is there. Turkey is need AFAB. Happily, thank you very much. Yo, Radical. Bro, thank you so much for the 15 months tier 1. I don't know what I can do. Like, I shared on Instagram. I hope people help. Like, I. But as soon as I finish, I'm gonna check the videos. What I did do is, I did check this out. I think I can share this on my stream. This. So I saw this. So you can go on this link on my Instagram, and you can as well donate to help here. So that's what I saw. That's why I was AFK before, and I posted it. So you guys should check this. Slides. I don't.
The story is pretty fun.
Props to you for having a rescue. Amazing.
Yeah. Oh my god, my hair's a mess. I just cut it yesterday. Okay.
Csak hogy mi a szar? A szar ez. Még lehet, hogy jó is amúgy. Elég sokan látták. Komolynak hangzik így. Na. Mule.
Quality content. That's quality content right there, guys. Bro, why are you writing quality content when you're out there watching it? Like, I know you, like, let's, wait, I'm gonna show you something. Look at this. What's his name? I'm gonna show you something. Wow, look at this, look at this, look at this. Look at this. I swear. Can I check? I can't check. Wait, let me check. Bro, you were here. I swear you were here. Don't write quality content when you were there. You were the first guy there, and now you're like, yeah, nah, it's not that quality. You've been there. You've been doing that. I know how you spend your time. Like, as soon as you have name Uncle, an ass has more viewers than you, bro. If I had that ass, I'd have double the viewers I have now. Trust me. If I had that ass, y'all people, it would be like triple the number of, because I got humor, I got looks, and if I had ass as well, trust me, you guys would be like triple here. Like, look at this guy. This guy got an ass. This guy got a fat ass. This guy, he's got a fat ass. And you guys watching him, I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna show you. Yo, he's got 270k. Oh, it's followers. My God, I thought it was fucking subs. I was in shock. You know what I'm gonna tell you? This guy's got a fat ass. Look at his legs. this guy, hard as fuck. All I'm gonna say.
Still will kickstart this whole thing and open them up to steal the map away. They're moving up through alt mid, but IHC want to try and fight for this. Annihilation with another opener. This is what he's been good at. Rain responds, trying to chase down these two players looking to leave, but with Rops dead over in the apartments, what was meant to be this A split into the site comes to a bit of a screeching halt for FaZe.
Techno's even holding his smoke on B, so he's ready to get that in. It does go a bit early, but better sooner than later. He's going to play behind it as well. I love this position. They're going to run right by. He should be guaranteed at least one kill here. They go right below him, and he fires away as his teammate comes through the smoke. FaZe get massacred at top B. And Annihilation finding that mid-pick. We've seen that so often from IHC.
Spawn, if you're in chat, your mama hoe.
Pistol right.
Not gonna lie, Spawn's mother is a hoe.
Keep doing that on Inferno, and FaZe get caught off guard. Rain tries to chase, but like you said, Bartak up and apps not checked. Rob's dead.
When I get this new card back, I do the streams from garage so I can show you everything. I swear.
It's clues in the name. It's full of lions.
Man, like,
yo, imagine if FaZe lose this, but bro, still there's nuke and ancient. I think.
That's the scariest part.
The thing that's so wild is like, yeah, they've been great on Inferno.
Ancient
We've seen them
and nuke,
getting better
bro.
and better with every game.
Yo, imagine FaZe get 0-2. Oh,
FaZe
GG.
Clan on one of their best maps.
And they're not playing with respect. Like, you know, sure, there were a couple of crazy rounds robbed, but FaZe...
Bro, Freezer, you need to take the 2 pills, you need to take ashwagandha, you need to lay in bed. You ain't gonna take the pills and just, oh, I'm so sleepy, I'm gonna die. No. You take the pills, you take ashwagandha, you drink water, and you lay in bed and you relax for an hour, and then you fall asleep. Don't be brain dead, please.
Leveling it.
Don't be dumb.
Matching it even.
Yeah, and you know, IHC are in this really unique spot where the expectations were damn near non-existent showing up to this event. In the eyes of many, making it through the play-ins was job done already.
They said they're here to win it, and I can see why. Playing like they got nothing to lose, and that is very much the case. Score ready for the jump up as Twist feeds himself. As
double flash, bro. These guys are prepared. They flashed once, and FaZe was like, I'm not blind, I got it. And then they flashed again, and then, oh, I don't see shit, bro. What the fuck, bro? And they're playing with a stand-in. If they were in full form, these guys are insane. Yo, I'm telling you, Spawn's mother sucked all their dicks, bro. She was down there doing work, bro.
Again, they're trying to keep the pressure on.
Yeah, Taste of Face's own medicine there. Just deeging armor and torn apart by an MP9. And now they have to take a real eco. So this should...
Yo, Spawn, we need to learn those flashes.
On the favored half on their map.
We need to learn those flashes.
And I think the fear really kicks. I don't want to get ahead of myself. You know, I didn't in Cloud9. And the whole time I'm just thinking, yeah, Cloud9 will come. They'll win. They'll come back. They'll win. But when you lose the opening map as a big favorite in an elimination game like this, that messes
Yo, 2 fucking sons of whores are in my channel writing shit to me. KD and Spawn, go get a fucking room and fuck each other, okay? Lick each other's ass, okay? You fucking sons of whores. Ron Yakupov, thank you so much for the gifted sub to High 1G. High 1G, welcome to the Yo Mama gang. When I say Yo Mama, we're talking about Spawn and...
Right? It's not one that you feel a lot either if you're a team like FaZe Clan.
Yeah.
You know, you can even have matchups where it's versus a more tenured, more experienced squad. And, you know, you're still the heavy favorite. You still bear that pressure. But it really is this idea that for IHC, there weren't expectations. They've exceeded every step of the way.
Yeah.
They've kind of blown us away throughout this whole tournament. And so, you know, they're in their stride. They're like brimming with confidence. It feels like they're shooting for the stars, because why not? And for FaZe, it's this idea that this is a matchup they're supposed to win. There's not even celebrations on the line. If they do, they're one step closer to Katowice, to the playoffs, but they're not there yet.
Absolutely. And I think the craziest part as well is we didn't even, you know, we saw potential in ISG back at Rio, but we didn't see any kind of crazy wins. I think they only fielded that one win against 0-0 Nation in that elimination game. But otherwise, you know, a loss to Outsiders, a single-digit loss to EG, gotten 2-0 by OG with, yeah, close maps, but that makes these wins all the more impressive because they've been 2-0ing and grinding out 2-1s against top 10 teams like Furia and just about Cloud9.
Something else I'll say as well, just to continue my kind of pro IHC rant here, is that unlike in other maps gone by, in other series gone by, you've often kind of had like an identifiable slow start from someone on the ranks.
Sure.
You could maybe say it's Score, who's just down bottom of the board, but man, like for the most part, it feels like they're all switched on right now.
Yeah.
Which is a nice feeling, right? Because sometimes you have guys like Techno 4K falling a little quiet, struggling somewhat, and then having to build into a series, but he's come into this one rip-roaring.
Yeah, we got some audio issues, as you can see, for the IHC boys, so just making sure that's all getting figured out. Admin's on the side already, and FaZe just have to sit there and mull in it. Never ideal, especially when you're on eco as well. But any amount of self-doubt can manifest in the worst of ways. And that's why, you know, let's talk about this, because the way that Cadian in that Game of Glory, rather, BBC documentary based on IEM Rio and more specifically Cadian and Heroic's run at the major, I think it was so interesting hearing the way that Cadian with subtitles talks to his boys and some of the things that he was saying, the way he described negativity and doubt in yourself or doubt in your teammates or doubt in a round or a call, about how it spreads and it infects. And what that can do. You know, if one person starts doubting, that's how you fall apart. And on the flip side of that point, that's why Heroic have been such an interesting team over these last, especially couple of years, because we call them the Brotherhood through thick and thin. These guys staying together. You know, the roster more than the sum of their parts, without a doubt. And you know, I think the Brotherhood there is an interesting talking point. So tying it back to FaZe, there can't be any self-doubt. There can't be any worry or any disbelief in a game like this where you are such heavy favorites. And that, that in essence gives the edge to the underdog to a degree. Because for IHC, yeah, they said they're going to win it and they're here to win it. You know, that's not what we're thinking from the outside. It's not what we're expecting. But to put a fact on that, if they win today, Harry, if they actually did the impossible, which we've said every day we've seen them play, but this really would be the impossible, because at least, you know, Cloud9 Furia in tumultuous positions, FaZe not in that position. I think you have to seriously open up your eyes to the possibility that IHC could make a run, because it's not like the crowd back in Rio put them off. They were playing against the crowd, against 0-0 Nation on those 12-3 games. They 12-3 two maps. They lost all the way back to overtime, and then they closed in overtime, like with the whole crowd screaming against them.
And I think interestingly, it'd be a very different vibe this time around.
Oh, I think everyone would get behind them.
Yeah. They would learn what it's like to be on that side of the coin. Well,
it's horrible because I want them in the SPO but we can't have no FaZe in the playoffs.
Yeah, it would really ring out, wouldn't it? And that's like the big thing, right? The reaction is going to be super different on the basis of the outcome of this. If FaZe win, it's an expected result. It was what was meant to happen. If IHC win, there will be chaos. We will be talking about this run forever.
Embrace the chaos. FaZe certainly have this map.
That's a lovely bit of movement, but Karrigan does not care.
Karrigan, he's really been keen to get involved in the early round, right? Especially on that CT side. He's 5-1 in opening duels right now. Damn good openers from the captain. Couple of pistols there, there and here, and nowhere now. Rain, hello. Oi, oi. Can you silent drop? Yes, you can. Rain's got the moves. But can he groove?
Oh, just tucking in time. Annihilation, swinging out, putting a stop to it. Returning a smile to IHC's faces. 9-all, a tie game. A tie game in this second half. First rifle round about to come through the pipeline for FaZe. This is our real good look in to see if they're going to be able to pick this one back up.
And again, reality check, right? We're 9-9. But 6 of those rounds are from pistols and conversions, right? Soon as FaZe went 0-3 down, they got guns. They went on a streak of 5 rounds in a row. I have the same expectation here. But Annihilation's got his AWP. So let's see what I actually want to do to open this round. Triple B, sending score into the fight. Bartak and Apps. FaZe want to go through this B smoke, perhaps.
Looks like it. Flash getting teed up. They won't go through just yet, but everyone's here lying in wait. Good damage on that nade. Oh, really good damage the second time around. Quite the way to open, but they don't want to lose it. I can't believe Score's gotten out.
Oh dear.
When these guys are getting sprayed, they're so slippery. No one can hit them. We saw Nafany have the same thing happen yesterday. All right. Oh, Annihilation's taking it one step further. A 5v3 in this first rifle round. This would mean everything to IHC to pick up the pieces, to dust themselves off after a slow conclusion of that first half. But it's not done yet. Brokey and Rain serve them a reminder. Put some respect on the FaZe name. Bartak back of the site. They don't know about him yet. They don't know that he's here. They've got to clear him out. They've got to clear this. Head taken off of Rain. Second man moving in, but Bartak's up for the challenge. And now it's just Rops. 30 seconds to play with. Time's not his friend here. Nade in, but it's missed. It's missed its mark. That nade could have been everything for Rops. Instead, it's nothing. IHC, double digits and in the lead. And you can only imagine how they're feeling right now.
How did Bartak win that? How did he live? He saw them coming at Apps. He didn't even shoot. He ducked down. He just said, come into my bomb site. You won't clear me. And they barely did. They go to the back side. He finds 2 kills. The second shot to Brokey. And then somehow lives throughout the spam, the nade, everything. Just tucks in that cubby. Unbelievable. And yeah, they're slippery, Harry. You can't hit them, but it's not 150 ping anymore. This is local area network. And ISG reminding you that anyone can do it. Anyone can take down the world's best. Well, not anyone. But somehow they're up in the lead. They win the first game round of the half. FaZe go to a half buy. Still very lethal in these rounds, though, aren't they? Tech9's popping out of Apps. That's how IHG won a round very early in their T side. Catching FaZe by surprise. He won't do that here, though. Bartak's in pit. He's got his eyes on the prize. And Blitz is in the site. He's got like a myriad of one-ways that he's been dropping on A-Site Inferno and playing over the boxes. Util's coming in. It's very clear.
Yeah, they know it's the A play, but now they've got to deal with it. Now they've got to contend with it, and that's easier said than done. Bartak wrestles with the AK, good for the double down in the pit. Annihilation smoked off, won't be able to play into this one. He's just got to give them the respect to get this plant. IHC, it's going to come down to the retake. 3v3 ensues, nades rain over the top, but no damage found from them. No target softened up, no task made easier for IHC. They've got a brawl for this one. Twist trying to fight, trying to play the bait and switch with Carrigan in the sight. Tapping away, up close, Techno spots them, uncovers the truth that there were 2 players side by side in the site here, and Annihilation's dropped out of the round as well.
I love that for Brokey. He hid out for so long behind that box, gave nothing away, while Twist is just peppering them with A1S bullets. And finally, FaZe pick up that eco win. Those are the rounds that you can't count FaZe out in. And I love the Apps pop as well, despite Bartak's double kill down from pit. Blitz falls immediately, and they round the corner onto Bartak. You need to trade better on that A site, unfortunately. And look what it's done to the money. They may have won 4-0 up in the half, immediately down to eco. They keep everything, though. I like that they don't overinvest in this round. Annihilation buys a bit, but he can also AWP next regardless. And Brokey's been handed an AWP. He will make use of it. I'd see, you know, 4-man A setup, but there should be no way that they win this round with so little put in.
Yeah, and if FaZe go B, that's the round.
Yeah.
IHC are trying to remedy that by pulling some extra resources over. Rops wins a fight in the apartments, so already the 5v4. The rest should just be a formality here for FaZe as they group outside of the B site. There shouldn't be a lot that IHC can do to change the outcome of this round. Might have basically everyone here, but with just the pistols, it's not going to serve them well.
I think they were going to try boost over the coffin smoke there, but he just jumped into the ground and FaZe heard the step. Bartek with some Kevlar to save. A little bit can go a long way. But, of course, Rops is in alt mid, making sure no one pushes. Same time, doesn't want to go in apps and give out his gun. Why offer up freebies to IHC? Make them earn it. And FaZe have earned an 11th round, and with 5 alive right now, so building up their own bank account so IHC can't find a couple of gun rounds and put them on pistols. Very important for FaZe to just not hunt here and keep everyone up. And so they shall. 11 to 10, FaZe back in control of this game. But I do think about that Cloud9 matchup, and I do think about the amount of plays that IHC had in their pocket on CT side Inferno. Lots of flash pushes, through smokes, and not really even fighting for Banana, which could be an issue for sure against a team like FaZe. But in terms of anchoring the site, they kept getting away with more than they should have. So let's see how that looks as FaZe go for B plays and gun rounds. Orbs out. But no util means Annihilation is almost certainly peeking down Banana.
Oh yeah, he wants to be involved. As mentioned, getting these kind of opening fights with the AWP, getting the ball rolling, it's been his specialty here on Inferno. Great nade down through mid, finding some good chip damage, and there's that AWP firing off the early 5v4, and when that AWP rings out, it puts the fear in you if you're FaZe. It sends shivers down your spine. He's done it to you again.
Excellent utility damage, right? 2 nades. And they've done 100 or 99 damage in this round from IHC. Now with a boost up, great position, but this is one that FaZe will be ready for. However, Annihilation might just grab a kill and get back. This could be a 5v3 before FaZe actually get a commitment in. The Molly's going to trap Annihilation, but all he needs is one shot to tee IHC up for this round. In come the flashes, he takes a blind shot, and now he's really rumbled. Smoke on the Molotov, they don't check the boost, they were chasing the AWP, and Score fires through for 2. Annihilation hits his from the back of quad, and Brokey now needs a highlight, but they go through the smoke. They don't respect FaZe nor Brokey in the clutch, and they find 11th with 5 alive.
This is such a legit performance that we're getting. They're so confident in that moment there.
Someone called Blair, is he okay? His heart's racing more than them.
They repel the B play. FaZe, they try to keep it simple after losing that first man. They think it's going to be as easy as running down the B site with that CT smoke in play, and it's not.
Unreal. He didn't even drop back. Call for a flash, try and get the reload off. Nope, just goes through.
And you know, I think one of the things that's so mental, because I see some folks out there still sleeping on IHC, still doubting, right? And, you know, with the other games, with Furia, you can say, yeah, you know, they come off the back of Rio, of the kind of highs, but also a bit of a fallout for them in terms of, you know, it felt like if they were going to win a major, that was going to be the major they were going to win. And, you know, there's been doubts around Art and his style of calling before. For Cloud9, they've had changes. So there's been caveats. There's been reasons why you could have tried to cook up some idea that this team's not legit. But with how competitive they are right now, my God, they're making a name.
And this is not the first step for FaZe, right, in terms of losing to an underdog. They've seen that at Rio, and they will not be here to make that mistake again. Flash up, double logs. If FaZe don't molly this, all they do, and they hit the shot, but the second player must swing, and Twist denies it. We needed someone to step up in this round, and Twist will fill that void. Bartak flashed into middle, finds Karrigan. FaZe need to commit as a unit. They need to make up their mind, and they know A is weak right now. That is the object of their desires. Score's rotating round. 3-on-3 with a minute on the clock. Score will get here in time.
This is scary. It's the 2 low health players entrusted with the A hold. Annihilation is very far removed, and if he's left retaken with the AWP, this one might fall on deaf ears. FaZe, this is their chance to course correct. In they come. Rain traded, but Brokey's there to pick up the pieces. Nice. And Annihilation is too far removed from this round.
Good call for FaZe. It almost felt like they were splitting out too much in that round for a moment, but I think Karrigan probably called them back and made sure they cooled off in a 3-on-3. Don't play into the madness too much. Don't let IHC pick you apart one by one. That's so quick. And the weird thing about Annihilation is it's like, Blade talks about on the desk, like, he's the best clutch AWPer at this event, but he's not the best AWPer. And like, that's a fact. Like, he doesn't hit every shot. That's certainly true. But this guy has pulled out a lot of clutches in play-in. And he's played a lot of very important positions on their CT sides, as an AWPer always does. Ooh, that was scary. But he was, in my eyes, the problem piece, the latest acquisition back at Rio as an AWPer, and he was a problem. But he has not been anything but a solution here in Katowice. I imagine another techie here as well. But for such a young team, right? Like this, the average team age is 22.2, but that's with Cabal over Bartak. And Cabal is the oldest player in the team. He's not here, obviously just having a kid. Bartak's 18 years old. That puts the average around 19 years of age throughout this current roster we're seeing. Not just inexperience, but damn, they're not even in their 20s yet.
Yeah, you know, and I know that, like, you know, their kind of run back at Rio, there was a certain degree of, you know, they were playing versus the guys they'd kind of watched play and create the game that they're so in love with, that they're so involved with, right? And so there was that element of being starstruck about it, right? That's not the case anymore. Let's take a look over at the B stream as well. Over here, we got Team Spirit taking on Team Liquid. It's a pretty close affair. It's an interesting one, and it even maybe tees us up for the lower bracket rematch between FaZe and Spirit, depending on results.
I think, obviously, Liquid are definitely the scarier team there in current form, you'd like to think. I don't think FaZe would be too scared of Spirit right now. And, of course, Liquid even beat IHC in their opener pretty easily as well. With a strong Inferno start for IHC, but they couldn't close it. I wouldn't even call this game a strong start. This has been back and forth from the get-go. But all pistols and all conversions to IHC in the map so far. Only 5 actual gun round wins. Oh, Techno, very dangerous. FaZe, they're going ahead of it, and that's a great spam through the smoke onto Bartak. Now it's just the AWP, but if FaZe wait these Molotovs, they're about to go.
I actually look like they want to try and push down Banana, come in with a fast flank. If they did this quick, they would have had the backstab. Instead, they might have missed this window. Annihilation is solely responsible for the A site, and they're already in. Too many angles, too much responsibility, and Rain locks him out of the round. FaZe with 5 alive. This one is a FaZe clan round all damn day, restoring a little bit of faith here. Not the kind of ropey nature of some of the other rounds gone by. They get that opener and they deliver on it.
Yeah, that's the swing round, right? Not just a kind of low buy for IHG.
Everybody expected maybe a 65 game. They're running out.
Like maxed out with an MP9.
Only USA and Canada? No, bro. Countries. You probably didn't select the correct continent or something. 100%, bro. 100%.
Way on the T side.
Hey, I'm gonna check.
FaZe poised
no
to
chance,
take
bro.
this map away.
There's no chance.
Very awkward timing for Annihilation, who stays on that angle, but he can hear them running up short, he can hear them coming out up, so he needs to turn, and as soon as he does, FaZe come around the corner. Very, very awkward timing. And he can probably go back for a second fight on A. And he can probably
We just saw there as well the reactions, right? That hurt for IHC. They know that was, you know, really the best buy they might end up having to try and keep this one in that. They might end up having to try and keep this one in that back and forth nature. It was a very important round for them. So just head in their hands. Reality dawning upon them that FaZe have won that breakaway round to start really picking up steam here.
Guys, at the end of this, 350 euros, we need to do a giveaway. Don't forget that. And we need to open some cases.
just because how important the AWP has been on the CT side.
Gonna open like 200 euros of
you
cases,
get an extra buy, it means,
and
but
we're gonna do
your
a giveaway.
Is gonna be up against 15, 11. Playing for overtime against FaZe, not comfortable. Oof. And triple nade up to B. That's even worse.
IHC are getting fucked at the moment.
Airstrike by FaZe.
FaZe looking like they want to go pretty quickly after getting that. They're anticipating that IHC, in all this pressure, are going to pull extra resources around to the B site. That's not happened. IHC have maintained the triple stack. Two of them over in top mid right now. Annihilation runner. Blitz comes in with a kill, but it's not enough to hold on to A. And one by one, these dominoes fall. FaZe teed up for 14, and there's nothing that IHC...
FaZe are now rolling it. They're rolling it now.
So wild, so out of left field that IHC looks so indecisive in that round, right? Like Blitz gets Molly back, Annihilation stuck in middle, he's playing anti-flash, but FaZe come through the smoke and he couldn't even hit a single target. Then Bartak on short, doesn't know whether to re-aggress or fall back, he's looking at apps, he's just caught in the middle of the open, and Blitz's angle is locked out by the AWP. So indecision for IHC, they didn't know what to do, they didn't know whether they wanted to fight or give it up, and FaZe, they live in the madness right there. That's a 14th round. And the trade at the end is perfect. No saving.
I'm telling you, the best move he could have done there was to go in the smoke, in the mid smoke. That would be insane.
That would be, it's one thing making the decision to buy last round because they could have afforded it, even if it's lacking the AWP. To buy full here is just a flat out mistake. Maybe it's just a hero gun. And in fact it is. Blitz buys, everyone else ecos, but even then, it's a lot of optimism.
Oye, caralho. Que isso, mano? Que outra?
Alright.
Muy
His
beleza.
own shoulders to go hero mode. Karrigan certainly did on CT Banana. Blitz looks to do the same, but what FaZe been after this entire T side is these A hits. Even when they find B picks. Twist tasked with holding this B push, but it's just a boost up. Ooh, he's going into it though.
Yeah, moving back, ready for it. The hero gun already cut down. It does fall behind the wall, so it's been retrieved, but moving on up. Twists is aware, gonna clear him, score, beheaded. And the rest of FaZe hitting the A bomb
Twist is farming them now. Twist is farming, bro.
This one feels set in stone here. 15 for FaZe, right around the corner. The hero gun accomplished nothing for IHC. Twist has won the B fights. The one man left is Bartak in the A-hold. He makes it exciting, but only for a moment.
Yeah.
So many players there to get that trade.
Very nice to see FaZe in this extremely high-pressure spot where many other teams have come crumbling down and they don't mess it up. They find 15 first. They are in control. That's reassuring with the amount of damage that IHC have already done here in Canada.
I mean, yeah, dude, like, FaZe are a very, very hard team to put games away against, right? That's from the experience, it's from the tenure, the belief of this squad that in the long game, they've got it, and that's something they're always going to have.
You got an old coach, though. The coach is very old.
People like to assign to Karrigan is that, oh, the 15-round choke, etc. And even though it has happened, I think one of the coolest things about FaZe is their consistency in overtimes in 2022. They closed out so many.
Yeah, I mean, just think back to Katowice Grand Final versus G2, the overtime final.
Ooh, Karrigan, what a play! It's so ballsy, he just beats him to the punch, he hears the low ammo, he goes through with no flash. Annihilation, hit this shot or your game is over. Karrigan will end it for you. The captain leads the way into A, and it's only a mag 7 up in apps. He's even pulled the pistol. Desperation for IHC, and it's sinking in now. FaZe are on your doorstep, and they have knocked down your front door. 5-on-1.
Bro. It looked interesting and it looked possible. He's 32 years old. The fuck, he's younger than me. You can't tell.
Partner. De most fogunk neki strongholdozni. Ugye? Szerintem is.
Memory bumps, which are dendritic spines, and each spine was less than, a millionth of a meter. It became a diagnosis, was divergent from so many of the other diagnoses in the sense that it was ideologically based, whereas none of the other diagnoses were. And as complex trauma eventually emerged, it became even more developmentally based, saying that living in a home where you're stressed out on a day-by-day basis in your own home in 24/7 is going to result.
A CBD kérlek, az visszaállítja neked az egészségedet, a homeosztázisodat, a szervezetedet összhangba állítja. Legalábbis azt a rendszert táplálja, ami ezért felelős. Röviden. Nem, biztos mind a kettőt ismered. Együtt van a kettő. Nem hiszem, hogy tiszta THC-t szívtál volna csak. Vagy fogyasztottál volna.
Result in changes in the brain that are quite radical. So interpersonal neurobiology was born at the same time. So developmental psychopathology and interpersonal neurobiology began to emerge.
Az mit jelent? Hogy tinktúra? Nem tudom, mit jelent ez a szó, hogy tinktúra. Mit értesz az alatt? A szárít... a kender női virágzatának szárított, préselt olajára gondolsz? Azt kérem, igen, azt árulok, de az nem pure CBD, hanem az egy full spektrumú CBD olaj. És az a jó, nem a pure CBD. Úgy be vagyok tépve, hogy nem látok. Mit írj a net? Igen, ez oké, ez ilyen, persze. Igen, árulok. A LinkTree-re, ha felmész, az első link lesz az, amit megkapsz. A legjobb minőségű C videóját vásárolhatod meg ott. Mással nem is érdemes foglalkozni.
And for the first time, we began to see that psychiatric disturbances had a long history, and everything that happens to a person needs to be put into understanding how to change the adult psychopathology. And I remember at the time, I was doing an interview with somebody from the media, and they were saying, well, how can you have things in the first few years of life affect you if you don't remember them? So you go into a therapist's office and they say, what happened? And if you don't remember it, then it couldn't affect you. And I think that that was a really fascinating statement. So I said to the person interviewing me, do you think if a person was left in the crib for the first year of life that it wouldn't affect them and not touched or held? And they said, well, I never thought about that. So the question is,
Nem, saját.
there are things that happen in these first...
Ahhoz, hogy saját legyen és jó legyen, ahhoz kéne nekem úgy kb. Egy olyan 5-10 millió euró, hogy belefektessem ahhoz, hogy gyárat csináljak, rendszert csináljak, logisztikát, szállítást, csomagolást, nem tudom, reklámozást, minden, nem. Reseller vagyok, igen. Tessék.
Few years of life that are radical. The mammals, of all mammals, the human is the least developed at birth. And so there's so much that occurs in those first few years of life. How does that happen before the cortex is even brought online? So it becomes interesting to begin to imagine sort of the physiological basis of this. So I came across this slide, and it was really memory bumps, which are dendritic spines. And each spine was less than, a millionth of...
Nagyon sok ócska, sőt az összes ócska, amelyik nem a handmade-es, azaz nem az én linkemerőben. Igen, sok cég van. Igen, nagyon-nagyon sok cég van, de én ajánlom, hogy próbáld ki ezt, és meglátod, hogy nem kell többet mást vásárolni, mert ez a legjobb. De tényleg próbáld ki. Te meglátod. És szabad földön termesztik? Hát, hogyha szabad földön termesztik, akkor nagyon érdekes olajat készíthetnek belőle, mert a szabad földön a kender az megfogja az összes létező szennyeződést, és hát igen, ő azt befogadja a metabolizmusaiba, és hatástalanítja egyfajta módon, de te azt nem szabad elfogyasztod akkor se. Tehát az jó lesz kötélnek, meg betonnak, meg egyéb dolgoknak, tehát az iparban lehet felhasználni akkor, de abban nem szabad orvosi olajat csinálni belőle. A régi stílus. Mi az a régi stílus? Szárított formába fel darálod a női kendervirágzatot és beletekered cigibe. Nem tudom, mire beszélsz. Hát, az van, hogy igen, az jó tud lenni, de az nem fogja neked táplálni az élménynek jó. Viszont az neked nem fogja táplálni az endokannabinoid rendszeredet. Szóval az élménynek jó, de ahhoz, hogy valóban elérje egy entourage effektet, azaz minden kannabinoidot és minden terpént magadba vegyél, ahhoz CBD-okat kell fogyasszál, és csak tőlem vásárolhatsz. Máshonnan nem vehetsz, máshonnan, hogyha vásárolsz, akkor az ablakon dobod ki a pénzedet. De tényleg így van, tehát nem viccelek. Milyen kedves volt a bácsi.
A meter, and that there in those as glutamate receptors are plentiful in these dendritic spines, and so there's kind of motor memory. So at that time, Bessel van der Kolk was writing about the body keeps the score, and that there was something happening in the limbic system where there was, implicit memory occurring in these early years of life, which were very different than declarative memory. And so the idea was, how does implicit memory affect people versus declarative memory? And that became part of the basis of trying to understand how trauma begins to work. But one had to first formulate sort of physiologically how that would occur in the brain. So, you want to talk about this a little bit?
No, you go ahead.
Okay.
I'll just...
So, I'm kind of jumping from years, obviously now we're jumping 20 years later, but the thing that really, I think, blew everyone's mind was that in this study of adverse childhood experiences, 17,000 HMO memories, what was found was that 22% were sexually abused as children and 66% experienced abuse, violence, and family strife. There was endemic levels of trauma occurring in the population. And the fact that it was done through a medical gave it certain credence. And then, I'm going to go through these quickly, but if you notice that as the ACE scores, the person has more and more of these adverse childhood experiences, the higher the rate of adult depression. Next slide. And following that, there was an increased rate of suicide, increased rate of alcoholism. Now, in some ways, this changes everything, because what you're seeing is that what was thought of as, what was thought of as something that, a medical illness that a person has, medical model, we're beginning to see that these events that occur. Now, the thing about these adverse experiences is that they didn't necessarily mean PTSD. What it meant was somehow that the person had an overwhelming experience. And so more and more, the word trauma became a little bit more diffuse. When originally we were talking about trauma, we were talking about PTSD trauma. Now we're talking about the traumas that were not meeting the criteria of PTSD could have severe long-term effects. And in these long-term effects, that we had to begin to think in a more broad way about defining what is trauma. And it's fairly idiosyncratic. So an event such as a death can be very traumatic to a certain person who is highly susceptible. For example, a person who's quite sensitive, then and not traumatic to another person. So the criteria for trauma became a little bit more obscure. And that's why later, when they defined complex trauma, it was much very controversial, but also really important to begin to somehow recognize the developmental psychopathology of this. Now, this last...
Igen. Melyiket ajánlom? Amelyiket meg tudod engedni magadnak is, tudod fogyasztani 3 hónapon keresztül. Tehát kezdhet valamelyikkel akarod. Csak egy pillanat, hogy ezt sem, hát melyik jól esik, amelyiket megengedhetem magad. 15-ös az finom, 15%-os. Azt egy hónap alatt el lehet nyalogatni. Mit a fasz csinálják ennyi fával?
This slide I want to show you now from Peter Fonagy is really one of the most important slides that I've ever seen, because what Fonagy and some of his associates looked at was early attachment style. And most of you know that attachment is measured in the first 18 months of life between the infant and the caretaker, and using the strange situation. And there are 4 different subsets of attachment. And what was so remarkable is that when he, in a psychiatric unit with a fairly large sample, what he measured was disorganized attachment. And what he found was that almost all the clients that presented with psychiatric disorder had disorganized attachment. Now, to me, this was a game changer, because what it meant was that instead of looking at the symptom, depression, anxiety, suicidality, eating disorder, alcohol addiction, even borderline personality disorder, or looking at bipolar disorder, that they all have one thing in common, which is that they have a history of disorganized attachment. And so Lori and I began to really want to understand attachment. So we went ahead and we got trained by Mary Main's people on the adult attachment interview. And that was a very rigorous kind of week-long training, 10 hours a day. And it was so useful in our thinking because we suddenly began to look through the lens of attachment rather than just the lens of trauma. And when we did that, the question came, how can you take somebody who has disorganized attachment and move them to what we call earned secure attachment? And so my curiosity was, let's say we're treating eating disorder, which we were at the time primarily. The people who we were able to turn from anorexic and bulimic to eating in a healthy way, were they changing from disorganized attachment to earned secure attachment? And how do we make that change occur? And so that became something that we began to study. In that training, we got trained with Dan Brown out of Boston. And he was curious in the exact same way. And he eventually wrote this wonderful book on attachment, where he, like us, began to focus on how you move disorganized to secure attachment. And that has been incredibly useful to us in changing how we work with patients.
Mark's going to talk a little more about specifics and disorganized attachment. I want to put things in a little bit different framework that actually is the same as how I've always seen it. So I think over time, what we call things changes, and often from field to field even, there's a level of fragmentation in which things are called different things, which makes it somewhat confusing at moments rather than unifying, and makes, you know, one field's research not necessarily as accessible to other fields. And I think that people don't really know the level of segregation among fields that's been the case until more recently. So, but to get to the point of what I was wanting to convey, I've always seen it as the traumatic events that occur, the things that are too much for the person's resources, internal and external, at the time it happens, and so can't really be assimilated and worked through in any meaningful way. Those events to me are in the foreground. They're things that go on and happen at moments in time. But against that is the backdrop. And the backdrop is always the attachment environment of the person at the time of the trauma, and especially originally, because attachment classifications tend to be pretty robust in terms of being laid down very early in time and being consistent over time without intervention. And so I think that trauma can't be treated without understanding the environment in which it occurs. So for example, Mark was saying that one person who's especially sensitive may be impacted by a death in a way that someone ostensibly less sensitive would not be. And I find that a bit of perhaps a misnomer, in that sensitive tends to be an attribution that was often stated to people when they were being not helped to deal with feelings. So someone just said, "Oh God, you're so sensitive." And so I shy away from that term because it's one that causes the person to blame themselves for not being able to get beyond certain experiences that reasonably enough for any human being, like mortality, are very hard to get through. And especially for a child who hasn't really been alive that long and doesn't have the frame of reference or the capacities or the neural pathways that they will have as an adult. So to me, what makes the differentiation is somewhat less of the child's sensitivity and more of the attachment environment's capacity, and to meet the child where they are. And so with death, for example, I think a lot of adults have not really been able to deal with it, have not dealt with their own grief experiences in a way that allow them to help the child come to some safety in a world where there's been a sudden death of someone loved. And the child thinks, how in the world will I be safe again? They may not think it that way, but they're striving to try to find safety. And when there is no reestablishment of safety, when there is not the ability to entertain the child's various feelings, especially the most intense ones, like grief, then it becomes problematic. It's not anyone's fault, because I think people tend to focus too much on who should we blame for this, because often the parents themselves haven't been dealt with in a way growing up that would allow them to be any better at helping that child than what they can muster. But nonetheless, something that might have been able to be bounced back from becomes something that just tends to be kind of a black hole within the client and never really dealt with, so that when more and more grief and loss occurs over the lifetime, it activates some of the original terror in ways that the person is unable to fully assimilate or understand, not realizing that it's not just about the current loss, it's about all of the unprocessed loss as well up until that point.
All right, so what I want to do next is talk about disorganized attachment, because my goal is to convince you that one of the key elements that we're going to end up on is that perhaps one of the biggest problems, I think, in doing trauma therapy is that people have not been well enough trained in working with dissociative features of it. And that because of disorganized attachment, one of the things that Strofe found in his longitudinal research on attachment was that the long-term effect of disorganized attachment was adult dissociative disorder. And the importance of that is that with trauma comes dissociation, and with dissociation comes fragmentation of the self system. So when I began to do the work on that, I went back and I read Kohut and Winnicott from start to finish, and I realized that self-psychology was really, long ago, right at the very core of trauma work. And so then I went back and I read Pierre Janet, and I realized that in 1900 we knew much more about dissociation than we do now. And most professionals hadn't been trained in that. So they were saying, I've never seen a client with dissociative disorder. And it was really that they had never really been trained to diagnose it. So people like Jean Briere, who began to develop the TSI, trauma symptom inventory, and Frank Putnam, who did the DES, really helped us begin to operationalize what dissociation is and how to measure it and how to begin to look at the subsets of that. Because it turns out that most of the clients that we see have an impaired sense of self, and they really don't know who they are, and they feel lost. And the part of the reason is because we hadn't conceptualized developmentally what happens at various stages of development. So if you have neglect in your life, there are certain things that you're not going to learn how to do in terms of being able to be with people or to be able to live in the world. And so eventually that was called metacognition. And there began to be much more research in metacognition at people's knowing how to know. And varieties of scales came out in metacognition. And, people at Menninger worked with Fonagy with beginning to talk about metacognitional therapy. And metacognitional therapy was really dissociatively based. So that was another whole way of coming at it. Peter Fonagy is a genius, and he really developed how to be able to approach this from an analytic standpoint. Now, as you sort of decontextualize this a little bit, what you see is that what disorganized attachment is, it's an affect dysregulation problem, i.e. you can begin to think of Marshall Linehan's work with affect dysregulation, lapses in self-monitoring. And what happens is the client would come in, and if you would do trauma work, they would get somewhat better, but it wasn't necessary. It was necessary but not sufficient. So I would go back to Bessel van der Kolk and I would say, yes, we can treat PTSD effectively, but that doesn't mean that the client is effectively treated. What we need is to delineate that PTSD treatment is necessary but not sufficient. And what are the other components of working with trauma other than trauma resolution? And a lot of it has to do with the development of the self system, integrating parts of self that are discontinuous, that are part of this disorganized attachment. So it gave us a lens to set new goals in trauma work. Clients would come in and we would do trauma resolution therapy and they would get better, but they really then left and they had impaired self-agency and they had never learned how to be able to explore their environment and learn how to play and have fun. And so I remember one client came in and I had, she was anorexic, she was dying. I worked with the anorexic almost textbook-wise with family therapy, did really good work and reversed it, did a lot of work around her childhood trauma, did trauma resolution therapy effectively. And she said to me as she discharged, Mark, I don't know how to live in the world. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, I can't write checks. I can't pay my bills. I don't know how to be with people. And I said, well, I can teach you how to do that. And she said, you don't get it and you never will. And that really kind of hit me hard. And about a month later, we did follow up with her and I sent one of the staff, and in her room that she was living in, it was filled with beer cans and she hadn't left for weeks. And, she had been deteriorating slowly. And she was just terrified to interact with the real world. She had been enmeshed with the mother for so long that there were so many things she didn't know how to be able to do. And I realized that something was missing. So I went back and I began to study Stanley Greenspan. And he wrote this book called Structurally Based Psychotherapy, Developmentally Based Psychotherapy. And what he said was that there are structural deficits that children get when they're not given adequate parenting. And so I realized that instead of trauma in the traditional sense, we had to look at neglect and what developmental deficits were there due to neglect. And that these interventions could not be reversed through cognitive behavioral therapy, that teaching people the skills was not going to work. I tried it and it didn't work. And so the question is, how does one give these structural abilities to people when they miss them developmentally? First, it had to be delineated what they were. So as you look at some of these, you just get to see dissociative parts, inhibited exploratory behavior, controlling versus submissive responses to their environment, so on. So what I wanted to look at metacognitionally what was going on and behaviorally what was going on, identify these deficits, and then measure them so that I can then set goals for the client and say, this client has difficulty with interpersonal interaction. This person's flooded with anxiety because they're so disorganized inside. This client is very, very depressed because they have no self-efficacy, and begin to have more robust goals in working with the trauma client. Now, at the same time, obviously, huge numbers of people were developing in the field. And of all the people that blew me out of the water at the time, Janina Fisher, she was working with Bessel van der Kolk at the time, and I heard her lecture and my breath was taken away because her ability to conceptualize was incredible. And she was saying so many of the things that I was learning from my clients so articulately. And this is one of her slides. And she said, start with the assumption that every symptom is a valuable piece of data and follow that symptom back and ask, how would this symptom have helped you survive in an unsafe world? So it was a reframe. Symptoms, depression, anxiety, anorexia, bulimia, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, these symptoms are survival strategies that once helped you survive, but now are interfering with your living in the world. And even something like chronic suicidality, that she reframed these as ways that you once learned how to survive. And the idea in this approach, which we were evolving and she was evolving at the same time, is that you wanted to be able to look at the symptom as a door or a window, or what Dick Schwartz eventually called a trailhead. And that if you look below the symptom, you can begin to understand its function and purpose. And I had this idea that every symptom has about 10 functions. And if we didn't try to not understand the 10 functions of the symptom and help the person find a healthy way to meet those needs, that we couldn't reverse the symptom. So our clients were coming in with multiple addictions. It was sex addiction, eating disorder, alcohol. But underneath that was the trauma, and the field was focusing on the symptom, i.e. 12-step work, cognitive behavioral work, and removing the symptom. And removing the symptom was a problem because the symptom was a clue to the underlying difficulty. And so what we wanted to do was to understand that you need to have this symptom until we understand its function and purpose. And if you remove the symptom, oftentimes you get symptom substitution. And the client doesn't get better, they just improve. And to really help them get better, you have to understand what's underneath it in some depth kind of way.
Well, I would say it's not necessarily so much predicated on understanding it as being able to allow for that function being met in alternative ways. So a person could happen upon that accidentally without even understanding the original function. But I think usually it's incredibly helpful for people to put in context why their coping strategies would have made perfect sense in the context in which they developed. And just, I'd like to give a couple of examples of this just so it makes sense to people in a more subjective way. So, for example, let's say you're 15 and you're living in a home where there's chronic conflict and the conflict flows over onto you, and so you go to your room a lot and just isolate. And because the family's caught up in chronic conflict, things are not happening that you really need in order to adapt to all of the changes that adolescence brings. So there are things that you're getting that are overwhelming and things you're not getting that are really crucial, but you don't even know what they are because they've never been available. You just feel more and more like an outcast, like you'll never really fit in with society. And so then things continue to happen that add to that sense over time. And let's say on top of that, you're expected to perform at a certain level that is either within or beyond your capacity, but it becomes harder and harder to do that. And even if you can do it, you feel that your value is tied up in producing rather than any innate value. And so, the environment is not necessarily able to be nourishing in that way. And so self-harm becomes some way of coping with feelings that there's no other way to cope with. And self-harm seems like a bizarre symptom to a lot of people, but it almost becomes a friend, a go-to. Or let's say you are living in a household where you feel you have absolutely no boundaries and that everything is prescribed by other people and you're not allowed to individuate and differentiate. And an eating disorder can become your way of insisting on boundaries that are hard for someone to argue with. And it's as though the eating disorder can become, your anorexia can become what feels like to the person a refuge in which they can be themselves, which again would seem like a very strange way of having identity, except not necessarily to the person who's reaching. Or a person, for example, feels incredibly socially awkward, and perhaps the family themselves are really unable to help the child develop social skills and to provide opportunities for the child to address their social anxiety. So the child retreats into video games or some solitary activity. And then they have to go to something and there's alcohol and they drink alcohol and finally they feel, oh, you know, people like me. I'm able to interact. Wow, I don't have the anxiety I have every minute of every day when I go to school or when forced to interact with other humans. So all of these things have a function in the original context. And the problem is that in the later context, what absolutely might have saved a person's life can become the very thing that threatens their life.
Now, Dick Schwartz, later in internal family systems therapy, came up with an ingenious sort of way of going at this. He would say to the client, what are you afraid would happen if you let go of that symptom? And when I asked that question, you know, the first 20 people I asked all gave the same answer, which was, I'm afraid I'll be alone. And so it brought me back to the attachment literature of realizing that since they had disorganized attachment, somehow the symptom had a primary function of dealing with their feelings and terror of being alone, and numbed it and modulated it, because the disorder was a disorder of allowing oneself to be loved. They could have relationships, but they didn't feel connected. I remember one client who came in, she was incredibly charismatic. Everybody wanted to be her friend. And I thought, wow, this person's pretty well differentiated. And in follow-up, I met with her, and she gave me the history that she was completely alone and had no connections. She said, you know, while I was in your program, I know it looked like I had a lot of friends, but the truth is I felt alone even when I was with people. And it again taught me that what we are observing in people's behavior may not match internally their experience, and that at its very core, if we didn't do something about helping a person be able to receive love or receive connection, that they're going to go back to their symptom. And so, you know, when I use the word intimacy disorder, what I'm talking about is the person's inability to receive connection. And it's sort of like in the old days, I was working in endocrinology. A hormone would be in the body, but it wouldn't bind to the receptor site. And it felt a lot like that to me, that person was with people, but they couldn't connect to the person and feel safe in that way. And that is at the very core of disorganized attachment. So to me, when I'm looking for treatment success, what I want to find out is the person has the capacity to form interpersonal relations. And that's a really big field all by itself. So Mary Harvey is another one of my heroes. And she's out of Boston. And she sort of summarizes this in this slide. And as I began to decontextualize in my mind sort of what I'm talking about here in terms of developmental disorders, I identified each one of these pieces and tried to begin to figure out how to be able to measure them. And as we talk about structural deficits, you know, some people literally can't take care of themselves, and that's a huge deficit. And Judith Herman realized that in her original book, that self-care was like the very first thing you had to be able to deal with individuals: eating, sleeping, exercising, and the basics. And then cognitive schemas that there was nobody more on target than Jeffrey Young. And we went some training from him. And what he was saying was that these schemas are not amenable to cognitive-based therapies, that one has to figure out how to get into the hard drive of the brain and change these early schemas that are based in the disorganized attachment. And so schema therapy became incredibly useful in beginning to think about how you change these core schemas, because you have to think of these as imprinted into the brain, interpersonal neurobiology coming back again. And so it's like cognitive behavioral therapies were useful, but oftentimes insufficient in being able to work with this in varieties of ways. And so on down the line. I'm not going to go through all of these, but if you know, you can look at any one of them in terms of what you're working with the client.
Well, I think actually good cognitive therapy is a bit of a double-edged sword because it's absolutely essential. And looking at belief systems and looking at the attributions they're based on, perhaps, and beginning to be mindful about them, or in other modalities, beginning to challenge them, beginning to reality test them to see, are they accurate in the here and now? It's useful, but I think sometimes people then feel like, well, I know better, so why the hell do I still act as if I'm operating under what I came to believe as a child, even when in my adult self, at my most lucid moments, I know better. And they feel as though somehow it's, again, some deficit in themselves that doesn't allow them to avail themselves of fully integrating the new information. But as Mark's discussing, sometimes these things exist internally in ways that are not readily accessible to simply the cognitive portions of the mind.
So what evolved was a new lens, which Diana Fosha popularized, I think, in her affect-based psychotherapy. Bessel was talking about at the same time, and large numbers of other folks. And the realization that so many of these are deficits are written into the lower parts of the brain, the limbic structures, and that the window into the limbic structures was going to be affect. And so the goal was, how do you access intense affect in a 50-minute hour and to begin to structurally change what was in state-dependent memory? And so more and more research was beginning to look at implicit versus explicit memory and to look at the very basis of what was written in implicit or even unconscious processes, and that how affect-based therapies. And so hypnosis at that time was popular. EMDR eventually evolved, internal family systems, affect accelerated psychotherapy, schema therapy, tapping, a whole variety of psychotherapies focusing began to recognize that if you were going to do cognitive-based work, it had to be in a strong affective state. And so the basis of trauma therapy is not so much working on resolving memory, but more on taking the lens of looking at the present symptomatology and understanding how it got engraved into the limbic structures as a survival strategy. So in those days, what we wanted to do was basically derive from the training in hypnosis, which was affect bridges. If you follow affect back, oftentimes it leads you directly to where it needs to go. And so, you know, the client would come in and there would be these symptoms that would be highly emotional. And if you just follow those emotions back, oftentimes they would take you right to where you need to go. So a simple procedure, which we began to use, 30 years ago, was scanning.
Yeah, I think it's just to say, if someone's out of control of affect, what do is stabilization. But then when there is some stabilization, you can, allow the person to scan back, is how we used to do it, from the current feeling or the current somatic experience or the current cognitive questioning about something. And scanning was a way in which a person could sort of, rifle through the file cabinet of something and pick out like files that had something to do with that particular thing. What it tended to provide was awareness of what all went into the file. It didn't tend to provide new information, but it provided information that by virtue of coming up in the context of what was being followed, helped to shed some light on what things may have contributed to whatever the client was attempting to get more of a understanding of and to feel less out of control regarding. What I found with it is that it did provide cognitive information. It didn't really cause the client to feel a whole lot of affect, though. And so preliminarily, it could be useful, but there was still going to be the necessity of assisting the client to deal with the cognitive affective state in a more integrated way so that things felt resolved, not just awareness being expanded.
So just again, to flesh this out a little bit, there was a client that I worked with years ago, and he would have compulsive sexual behavior with men and then come back home to his wife and kids. And we might have what he called 10 tricks in an evening. And at that time, HIV was very virulent, and he was going to kill himself and his family. And he would describe that when he had these tricks, he would have what are called butterflies in his stomach. And so I just had him imagine the butterflies in his stomach and then follow them back. And it took him back to when his dad was sexually abusing him. He would experience butterflies in his stomach. So there was something in the reenactment and repetition that was tied to that in some way. And so we were accessing implicit memory. And as he tied together the current with the past, it began to, instead of eliciting a feeling of safety, instead terror. So the terror and the experience of the tricking got tied together. And at that point, he was able to stop, and it worked like a relapse prevention technique. Now, it didn't cure him, but it allowed me to get some relief from the symptom long enough to begin to do more of the work around the sexual abuse.
Yeah, I was also thinking of an example on the way in this morning of how scanning was useful. So when you have a recalcitrant symptom that the clients tried to go at from a variety of different modalities, this wound up being somewhat useful back when. I think there is an even more useful way currently, but so I was thinking of the example of the client we had, and he had a particular fetish sexually, and he was in a relationship with a partner, and the fetish really came between him and being able to feel connected with the partner. And he didn't want to be at the mercy of it, but he couldn't really put together why he would have such a symptom and felt just pretty much shame at not being able to relinquish it. And when we were able to do scanning with him, he connected with a memory that he'd always had, but had never really talked about. Because the worst things that happen to us, we, I think, all want to put in a box, lock it up, and put it in the basement of our awareness and move forward like society tells you. Just move on from that. The problem is those things in what seem like those airtight boxes don't discontinue to impact us, but they just impact us often in ways that we're not aware of the connection of, and therefore we feel perhaps more screwed up than ever, not being able to understand how in the world would I be doing such a thing. So in his case, it really, the scanning was able to allow him to talk about and feel about as well this chronic bullying that he had had in high school, which he always knew about, but he got in touch with the specifics around a particular locker room incident with the other boys, in which actually what it was that he now did as part of his eroticism was done to him as part of his humiliation. And he never put the two together prior. So it's not as though it were something new, but it's something that he had never really allowed himself to deal with subsequently for reasons that are reasonable. And he was really able to go back and ultimately to be with himself from his current capacities in a way that actually that adolescent boy had really crucially needed someone to be with them, but there was no one to turn to for him at that point in his life. So a lot of what winds up being healing, actually, just to venture off into this, is the client's ability to reparent themselves in a way and to provide whatever was not originally available. But to do that is very difficult originally for most people because they associate those aspects of themselves with the things that happened. And so they feel a sense of desire never to connect with those parts of themselves, and also often blame those parts of themselves for the trauma, blaming the victim, really.
So 30 years ago, the model that Horowitz suggested was abreaction, particularly with sexual abuse survivors, which was a revivification of past memory to rework the trauma. And in truth, that probably was the wrong model. And at the time, I think that there was a kind of an emphasis on not talking about trauma. And so there was this idea that, look, when you have something like grief, one of the most useful things is to be able to find a family of choice and be able to talk about it with other people. And if by doing that, you can eventually get to the other side, and with the right comfort and soothing, eventually work through the grief. And that alienating and isolating yourself was probably antithetical to grief resolution. And trauma is really a grief model. The problem with that is that more and more data began to be accumulated saying that for some people, talking about trauma can make it worse, and they don't get to the other side of it. So one of the burning questions came, what kind of work do you do with memories? And is memory work really trauma work? And so I think that still is an important issue in the field, because I think some people think that trauma work is having people talk about memories. And so probably some attention needs to be placed upon how that model has changed and evolved over time.
Well, just to put it a bit differently, let me think about it, put it differently. Some people as therapists are themselves somewhat affect phobic. So it's very hard for them to tolerate a client's intense feelings. And often that winds up being similar to what given clients may have experienced growing up, where someone really could not tolerate their intense feelings and sent them to their room. So clients learn to read signals, especially clients who've been through traumatic experiences. They become so highly attuned to other people that they perceive nuances and subtleties that often the average person might not. And so when a therapy is such that the feelings that come up for the client can't be permitted, it's a problematic therapy that doesn't truly resolve much. On the other hand, there could be therapists who would find it somehow consistent with their own temperament to allow lots of affect. And what I would say is that there's some clients who feel in a way that actually blocks feeling. So too little feeling and too much feeling block actually getting in touch with the cognitions and the affect in a way that can be healing. So I recall one a client come in and she said, I have gestalted my father and psychodramatized my father to death. And I've done this and done that and felt this and felt that. And, and she was actually hardly finished. She actually didn't seem to have begun, because she was very good at feeling, but the way in which she was feeling actually blocked her getting in touch with what it actually felt like when the dilemmas were creating themselves earlier in life, and blocked her ability to have compassion for the earlier versions of herself. So it looked like a lot was going on, but not much was truly getting assimilated or unburdened or integrated.
All right, so at the cornerstone of trauma treatment has been the telling of a story to a witness. And the idea of this is that humans really want to be heard and want somebody to do something to shift their state. So wanting to be heard is important. So for us, group therapy has always been a treatment of choice because being able to talk out loud about what happened to you and having a village of people to hold you and nurture you and care about you and support you is really critical. So we've always tried to work in a residential setting because it provides for the building of a therapeutic community. And whenever we try to do this work outpatient and we have groups, it can provide very similar. But the more effective the community is, the more healing it can potentially be.
So to say that in a little bit different way, one of the qualities of our most painful experiences, which I'm not going to call trauma because I think that's too reductionistic, but the things that we can't let ourselves feel, the things that we can't reconcile, the things that we can't figure out, the things that we can't move past, the things that keep reasserting themselves in our lives in the same form but in slightly veiled ways, those things, usually when we've experienced those things, what we felt at the time is alone and uniquely screwed up, to use a non-clinical term. And I think that the reason that group therapy, when it's powerful and where the group norms support people disclosing things in ways that are incremental, is that what can happen is other people in the group say, I didn't have that experience, but here's how I can relate to it. And then people feel less alone in their aloneness because they realize that, you know, in many places in the world, when they were feeling their aloneness, were these other people that they've learned to care about and value who are feeling the same feelings. And it's somewhat shame neutralizing, actually, in a powerful way, that one-to-one therapy between a therapist and a client can't quite measure up to. It's